Welcome everyone. This is Katie. I'm back again today, this weekend with Musicians Live Talk. Today I have a really special live talk because it's not over focal dystonia, but it's over muscle tear, so an actual injury that brass players usually experience. It's quite, I would say it's more common than usual than people talk about, but I'm really excited to talk about it just because this opens the doorway to conversation about this particular injury. So I have Jonathan Vieker here today, and he's going to talk to us about his experience. Sorry, Jonathan, I already botched up your name.
That's okay, it's okay.
Jonathan, I'm just really happy to have you here today, and he has a wonderful blog called Lip Rip Blues, and I've read it many times, and I'm just really grateful for it to be out there, Jonathan, because I mean, it's been such a good resource for people. I'm sure people reach out to you all the time about this.
Yeah, you know, since starting the blog a few years ago, yeah, I've been contacted by about 70 different players now, and you know, some of them it's just kind of talking shop and talking about how we've recovered, or you know, how we're in the process of recovering, and for some of them I'm kind of coaching them through it a little bit. So but yeah, you know, it's been an opportunity for people to kind of connect around this topic that we don't always talk about as much as we should.
Yeah, I agree. Well, can you go ahead and introduce yourself really quickly by just telling us a little bit
Sure.
about what got you into trumpet playing, why you're passionate about it, and kind of your background?
Yeah, totally. So as Katie said, my name is Jonathan Vieker, and currently I work in higher education administration. But you know, kind of a previous career, I was a full-time musician. So did my well, originally I got into trumpet in high school, actually. Right before my freshman year of high school, I started playing a little bit of trumpet, and I had taken piano lessons as a kid, but I was interested in an instrument that I could play in an ensemble, you know, to have the social aspect. So, you know, I had lessons from the very beginning, and that really helped kind of get me off on the right track. And yeah, I made fairly rapid improvement, I think, during high school. I decided it was kind of one step at a time, right? Like I picked up the trumpet, got some lessons. My parents are musicians, so I had kind of an advantage there.
Oh, wow.
Decided to major in music. Yeah, kind of towards the end of undergrad, I was going the education route. I decided I'm not sure teaching high school band is the right call for me, so went into performance, and I went to graduate school for music performance. So I went to the University of New Mexico and worked with Jeff Piper when he was still teaching there, and John Marciando, and Jeff's retired now. And yeah, so, you know, my injury kind of came about, well, we can maybe get into that in a minute, but, you know, I was a little bit casual about the trumpet for a long time. You know, I'd missed a lot of days, didn't take my practicing super seriously. And when I decided to go the performance route, I felt like I had to kind of make up for lost time. And so I got really into it in graduate school, and had some injuries, ended up making a career change as far as how I make a living, but I still play every day, and I'm still really active as a trumpet player. So.
Did you study with like just primarily one person during, or like you said you mentioned your teachers, but did you study with other people on the side as well, or is it just primarily just one person kind of at a time?
You know, it was kind of primarily one person at a time. So I went to undergrad at Truman State University, which is actually where I work now, and studied with Dr. Greg Jones when he was there. And I, you know, I'm at the age now, I'm in my mid 30s, you know, some of the people I worked with have retired, and, you know, it feels like it's only been 2 or 3 years, but it's been a little while now. So Greg Jones for undergrad, and then, yeah, in graduate school, so Jeff Piper was my primary instructor, and did some orchestral excerpts and kind of orchestral masterclass work with John Marciando, who is still there. But one of the reasons actually that I went to UNM is that I do some jazz playing as well, and Bobby Shu is a major jazz trumpet player, and he lives and still does in Albuquerque, and so I was able to take some lessons with him off and on while I was there too.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was gonna say I've actually seen Bobby Shu quite a few times because he came up to Denver a lot to perform, and my brother-in-law I think has played with him in a couple jazz groups as well.
Oh, wow.
Trumpet. Oh, by the way, my twin sister's a trumpet player. My brother-in-law's a trumpet player. My nephew was almost a trumpet player. Way too many trumpet players in my life.
Sure, yeah, you only need one or two usually. So
yeah, just
no, that's really cool to have that connection. But yeah. I always feel like, you know, trumpet is such a difficult instrument, but horn is even harder. You know, if a
Well,
person can make a go of it on French horn, they have my utmost respect.
oh, thank you. Yeah, it's difficult in its own way, but I have so much respect for trumpet players too, because unlike us where our bell is facing backwards, you guys are just straight out there. I mean, there's nothing covering it up, and you're just out there, and not only that, but your range and having to have that endurance to continually just cut through the orchestra or also cross genres as well. It's just amazing. So
Well, yeah, so we have different challenges. Your partials are so close together. I don't know how you guys do that.
yeah, they are so close together. It is so funny. I started teaching my nephew Nathan French horn. He's in the 4th grade right now, and he said to me in one of his lessons, he said, "Aunt Katie," he said, "playing the French horn is like riding a butter stick gliding across a heater." And I said, "Oh, wow, I never thought of it that way, but I can
Pretty slippery,
imagine."
yeah.
It's somewhat like that, I guess. It's so funny.
That's a good simile there. Yeah, that's good.
But so you saw Bobby Shoe as well, and then what happened from there on then?
Yeah, so I was in grad school. I was at UNM and was taking the performance on the horn really, really seriously all of a sudden. And so practicing, I got there in 2008 and, was working through my degree, and I was very fortunate. I moved to town, and I had always kind of wanted to freelance and to be kind of a working player. And I went to undergrad in a town of 17,000 people. So, I actually did a little bit of gigging in Kirksville, Missouri, but there wasn't that much to be done. So moved to Albuquerque and started getting some calls to do some live work, to play with some various bands, a little bit of lead playing, a little bit of jazz playing. And so I was very fortunate that I got to work right away. At the same time, I was studying with Bobby occasionally, and anytime you take a lesson with Bobby, he dumps a lot on you. He gives you a lot to do. So I was trying to work on my jazz playing, and I had an assistantship with the jazz band at UNM, so I was doing some playing with that group. I just had all these different areas of playing, and I was kind of trying to make up for lost ground, like I said. So I was playing like 5 to 8 hours a day, and and I had some warning signs that I wasn't really taking seriously. Like my embouchure was trying to tell me, like, dude, you need to slow down a little bit. I was having some bruising, of the actual lips themselves. I have these kind of sharp pains sometimes as I was performing, and just utter exhaustion the next day. Sometimes, just a real heavy feeling in the chops.
Was it on one particular side, or was it just kind of in the center, or was it on like your upper lip then?
So as the warning signs were accumulating, they seemed to kind of be all over, but it tended to be right under the mouthpiece, right where the mouthpiece sat. I have a lot of bruising and kind of soreness. And it culminated. It was May 7th, 2010. It was almost exactly 10 years ago. And I was playing this gig with this great local kind of top 40 band called Red Wine, the fine wine from Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I remember it was the last tune of the night, and I went to play an F sharp on top of the staff, I believe it was. And I felt this kind of searing pain in my lip, in my top lip. And after that, I couldn't really make a good embouchure. Like, it felt like I was telling the muscles to contract, and the top lip, especially on the left side, didn't really want to. And so that was kind of the beginning of my experience with lip injuries.
Oh no.
Yeah.
As pain happened, and you said it's kind of searing pain, and I just want to stop and talk about the how it feels, kind of, because a lot of people ask, like, well, what does it feel like? And it's hard to describe sometimes for people. So you can have to give a lot of different analogies. Did it feel kind of like a burning pain?
That initial injury, the pain wasn't overwhelming, actually, because I'm kind of conflating the two. I had another more serious injury a few months later where I actually tore the lip muscle. And so that second one, that I remember thinking that felt like a red hot needle going into the lip. That was excruciating. The first one was kind of a pop, kind of a snap. It didn't hurt a ton. I had a little bit of kind of a dull soreness, and then even the next day I had some. But that was just like, felt like the muscle just wouldn't work anymore. It was like I was,
oh my gosh.
like, and the analogy I give is like, if you imagine, like, if you make a bicep, like if you tense your bicep and you push on it, like the bicep muscle can resist. But if you don't tense your bicep and you push, it hurts because the muscle is not tensing to resist the pressure. And so that's what it was like playing on this embouchure.
Oh wow. And then when you massaged it, did you feel any like did it feel flatter than like other areas of your lip or different?
Yeah, it totally did. So if you imagine your lips kind of separate into 4 quadrants, so top and bottom, obviously you have a top and a bottom lip. Then if you imagine those with a left and a right side, you have 4 quadrants, right? So my top left quadrant felt completely slack. And if I made an embouchure and I felt it, it felt thin and like there was like it had lost like actual mass, which is impossible like for that to happen immediately, but it felt like somebody had like scooped my lip out. It was really kind of weird.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And then as soon as you realized that it was an actual, well, I mean, like you were like, okay, this has to be like a muscle tear. Did you do anything like try to ice or heat pack or apply anything or?
I remember the next morning I was hoping that it would kind of go away by morning, and it was not any different in the morning. So I did do some icing, and that didn't seem to make a whole lot of a difference. I ended up taking a month off, and I did what Googling I could in 2010. There wasn't a whole lot of information out there, or there weren't great blogs like yours about playing injuries.
Oh,
And
thank you.
but I did find this name, this doctor in Canada, Simon McGrail, Dr. McGrail, who was a surgeon who is still, he's retired now, but a facial surgeon who had done some surgeries on people. And I called him, and he wanted me to come out there and see him. Didn't have the money at the time, so took a month off, and I did these exercises that he gave me, and those are on my website. If you search for Trumpet lip exercises, you'll probably find them. So I took a month off, tried to do some rehabilitation, and things did seem to get a little bit better with some time off.
Wow. And I just want to say Dr. McGrail is awesome. I mean, he's becoming more and more well known for helping musicians with muscle tears or micro tear surgery.
Yeah.
And as well as Dr. I can't say his name.
Dr. Vanderkolk, maybe in Baltimore. Yeah.
Yeah, Vanderkolk.
Yeah.
And for any of you that don't know, Dr. McGrail is in Toronto, so that's why it's probably so expensive to fly out and see him.
Exactly. Yeah, it was not a cheap proposition, and at the time I was living in Albuquerque, so that was quite a trip. Eventually, so I took some time off, and a few months later I had a kind of a fall. Actually, it was about a year later, because I remember I was able to get my playing together enough to give my graduate recital, finish my master's degree, which was great. But about a year later, a little over a year later, I'd kind of been dealing with the same issues. Things would get better for a week, and then I'd have another kind of the same injury would seem to happen. Like the embouchure would lose the ability to contract. So I kept having these kind of ups and downs, and then after about a year, I had the big injury again, the one that I described as like a needle into your lip, and that ended up. I did go out to see Dr. McGrail. At that point, actually, I had gone out to see him. So I'm getting my facts right. I went out to see him after the initial injury, and he said it's just stretched. Then things kind of went up and down for a year. Had the second injury, which was the big one. Went out to see him again, and he kind of felt it and said, "Yeah, it's torn this time." So,
oh my gosh!
So came back a few months later for surgery.
Oh my gosh! Yeah. Well, I'm so sorry all this happened to you. I mean, I know it's not easy, to go during the time of going through it. It's like, oh my gosh, it's awful. When you went to see Dr. McGrail, can you kind of just describe to people how he kind of assessed you so they get kind of an idea for like if they were in the same situation, what would kind of happen if they went to someone about this muscle tear to Dr. McGrail?
Totally. Yeah. So I can still remember quite vividly what he did. And Dr. McGrail at this point I think he's in his late 80s now. So I don't know if he still does consultations. I don't think he's doing any surgery anymore, but he might be available for phone consultations. But anyway, what he did was he put on, latex, doctor gloves, and he felt my lips. So he stuck his thumbs. I'll actually do it for you. So he did this, and he kind of grabbed the lip tissue, and then he would have me like make an embouchure. And what he was doing was he was feeling underneath the skin. He was feeling the muscle movement with his fingers. So he would have me do this, and then I'd make an embouchure, then he put his lips over here, so he put his fingers over here, and he had me do the same thing. So he was basically trying to feel like, is there a, well, what I think he was doing was trying to figure out, is there a place where the muscle is not contracting?
Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for explaining that so much. And was it kind of painful when he was doing it though?
No, not at all. It was not painful at all. Yeah, he was pretty gentle. I think he kind of knew what would cause pain and what wouldn't, so it wasn't painful.
Oh, that's good. And then
Yeah.
when he told you, yeah, this is definitely a muscle tear, he obviously said it requires, or it could, you could do surgery if you wanted to. Did he say anything else, like prescribe anything or anything else you should do?
You know, he didn't. So the first time I went to see him after it was just a stretch, you know, he prescribed those exercises that are on my website. And so those did seem to help. But, you know, the second time he said, yeah, you've torn it, and you're probably, you know, surgery is probably going to be the way to go. I think he said, you know, you can try rehabilitating on your own. He said, you know, I do remember him saying, you're not going to tear it any more than it is already torn. So if you want to keep playing, you can. Now, and I did for a few months. I remember that injury was in August of 2011, and I had surgery in December. So had to get some cash together. And during the time, I continued to perform and to gig. And it was okay, but things just, they didn't feel stable at all.
Oh my gosh. Well, oh yikes. I'm so sorry that you went through that.
Well, thanks. You know, I know, you know, having had your own experience, you know, sometimes time can give you some perspective, but at the time it really sucked, to be honest.
Yeah, but I understand going through the whole process of doing anything you can to save your plane. And
Exactly.
you know, I've spoken to other musicians that have muscle tears, and I can't remember who I was talking to, but they said once to me, you know, what happened to them was they actually, instead of realizing they had a muscle tear, they took time off and it actually healed. But what happened was they ended up with scar tissue in their upper lip, and they said it felt like a little bump underneath the lip.
Yeah.
And they said they could still kind of play on it, but sometimes the scar tissue gets irritated. So he kind of had to like move around a little bit, his mouthpiece to the side just a little bit to keep playing. And you could kind of still play, but he said, yeah, because of this scar tissue, it just kind of, he said it depends on how it heals. The scar tissue can either really affect your playing, or you can somehow work your way around it. He said, but he said when he thought about surgery, his doctor told him, well, even if you get surgery, it will either help or it won't. He said sometimes it might make it worse, but the main thing they do with surgery is they take that scar tissue out and then they sew the muscles back together, and then it has to heal properly so that they can try to rehabilitate again. But he said it's not a quick fix. It's like you can't just start playing immediately right again. It's definitely, you have to rehabilitate.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, Katie. That was totally my experience. So, you know, after the surgery, and we can discuss the surgery too, I'm happy to go into that, but just to cut ahead a little bit, you know, after the surgery, it was not at all like, oh, okay, things are back to normal. What it was, the analogy I use is that, like, imagine you're like a pitcher, like a professional baseball pitcher, and you wake up one day and it's like, if you've ever read The Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka, this guy wakes up and he's a giant cockroach, and that's just the rest of his life. So like imagine you wake up and you're a professional baseball pitcher and there's somebody else's arm on your arm, and like it's just some person's arm. And this is a very Kafka-esque idea, but like, and now you're going to try to like be a professional pitcher and have to get used to somebody else's arm. Like, obviously that's a crazy idea, but that's kind of what it felt like after surgery. It was like the lip felt like a different lip. It had like no muscle tone. It didn't feel like it did anyway. And rehabilitating was like, it was like going back to being a fifth grade beginner. It did work. It took a long time, but it's not a quick fix, I guess is what I'm saying. You know, just like you mentioned.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you talked about that, and you said that as well, because you know, I didn't realize that muscles were as, how do I say this, as fragile as they are, because we tend to think like, you know, if you bulk up, like even with regular muscles, if you bulk up and you get bulky, you know, someone could punch you in the guts and you wouldn't, get hurt or something, that kind of thinking.
Right.
That's just not true. I actually just recently went through, I had gallbladder surgery last May.
Oh,
And it takes 6 weeks to heal. And then, so 8 months later, like back in January, I just all of a sudden started experiencing what was a hernia in my abdomen.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's right on the incision line where they did my gallbladder surgery.
Oh, man.
And when I went to the doctor, they're like, well, they said what happens is when you do surgery on a muscle, or you cut into that muscle, especially in a weak area like the abdomen, in a weak spot, they said it's really hard to get it to be strong again, because it's just like, it's different.
Right.
And they said it's the same thing with like C-sections. Like I've met women, and I know this is kind of seems unrelated, but I've met women where they've had C-sections. They're like, oh, I can't like do jumping jacks anymore, because when I squat and I jump, my lower abdomen muscles are different, now that I've had surgery down there, and I just can't move the same way.
Right.
So you'd be surprised at how much your muscles affect you and how much they can change too, just by a surgery or injury.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you don't, like everything else, we take them for granted. We take our body for granted when it's working well, and then when something happens, it makes us kind of appreciate how lucky we are to have things functioning correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, with your muscle tear, so you started to begin to prepare for surgery. Was there anything you had to do before you went into surgery, like any preparations or anything like that?
Not a ton. He did tell me I could keep playing, and at that time that was my main source of income, so I kept gigging. And he had me do the exercises that he had prescribed me originally, and basically in order to have the muscle be as kind of in as good a shape as possible when he did the surgery, in order to kind of speed recovery. But that was it.
Oh, that's great. And I love those exercises that you shared, because I actually use them part of them for helping with my embouchure dystonia, because I do a lot of facial stretches and a lot of jaw stretches and tongue massage and like just anything upper body stretch. But I love the air bubble in the lips, because I really think it helps a lot with, we're so used to just, setting our embouchure, and then to just do the opposite and get the muscle stretched out in the opposite direction in a gentle way, I feel like it really helps a lot.
Yeah, it feels really good.
Yeah, I do it all the time. Like I record videos for my blog, and I think in every rehabilitation video I've recorded, I'm always like covering my face and doing that particular stretch.
Oh, wow. I have to revisit it. I haven't used it in a few years, but now as we're talking about it, I'm remembering how kind of therapeutic it was. So I'll have to get back into that.
So that's great. And then, so when you went into surgery, I mean, obviously he probably didn't have to put you under at all.
No, I kind of wish he had.
Yeah. Did he give you anything, or was it just kind of like?
So I'll walk you through it, and I won't get too graphic, but this was not a pleasant situation. So I'll try to keep it not too unpleasant. But so I was not put out or anything. He injected some lidocaine, which is like Novocaine, directly into the lip. So that was really really painful, but only for like 10 seconds. So lidocaine right into the top lip, and then at that point he had a scalpel, and he made an incision. Basically, so the tear for me was just right above center and a little bit to the left. So he made an incision there, peeled back the skin to get to the muscle, and he at that point I was all numbed up, but he actually had me make an embouchure, or try to. And so I did, and then with the act of my embouchure kind of coming together, opened up the little muscle tear, and he was able to see it. So when the muscles relaxed, you can't see the injury, but when you tense it, you can see it. So then he had, he used a suture to sew it up, and then he cauterized it, which was unpleasant. at that point, put the skin back and then sewed up the, the larger incision, cauterized that. And that was that. I think it took less than half an hour, maybe about 20 minutes total.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, really quick.
Really quick. Yeah, Dr. McGrail, I think he told me he'd done over 100 of these. So, he is or was, the guy for this kind of thing. He definitely had the air of somebody who had done this, 100 times. And I felt like I was in good hands.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, he's done quite a few surgeries on really well-known musicians too.
Yes, he
one
has.
of course being and I can't think of his name now. He's another trumpet player. He wrote his book. Was
Still
it
playing?
Yeah, what was it? Yeah,
Denver
still playing.
Dill. Denver Dill.
Yes, Denver Dill. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Denver's great. He was a huge help to me.
Oh, that's great. So you reached out to Denver then?
Yeah, as I was going through this, I reached out to 15 or 20 different people, and anybody I could find online who had had this surgery or who had chop troubles. And again, this is 10 years ago. There weren't the great resources that there are now. So remember, Denver Dill was extremely helpful. Talked to him on the phone. A player named James Barella, who I think still is working in Las Vegas. Really nice guy. Talked to me for like an hour one night about his experience with this kind of thing. And then Alan Siebert, who is the trumpet professor at the Cincinnati Conservatory, he had this same surgery, I think back in 2004, I think. It's been quite some time. He was great. I took some lessons with him, drove out to Cincinnati and took some lessons with him. And once I'd had the surgery and was kind of trying to relearn how to play, he was really instrumental in helping me kind of get my chops back together.
Wow. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, and I would love to talk a little bit about, and I always feel like there's never enough time. Can you talk a little bit about rehabilitating, like what is some advice for like what you can kind of do and things you can do and things you should kind of avoid?
Totally. So this is something I have thought a lot about and feel like I have kind of a cogent message, that I can put out there. So it took me longer than it takes most people to come back from this surgery. Some people who have it aren't able to come back at all. As you kind of mentioned, sometimes it just doesn't help. But for me, it did seem to help. Let me put it this way. It was a very gradual process. So it was, I think, if I remember correctly, the doctor's orders were 6 weeks of nothing, and then 2 weeks of like lip buzzing, just for like 2 minutes a day, and then mouthpiece buzzing for 2 weeks, and then 2 minutes of playing trumpet. So it was very gradual, and that was definitely the key. But even then, it took me a long time to come back. And what I would say that the key is with any kind of chop troubles is you have to be scientific about it. So I tell people, you can wander into an embouchure injury or to a playing problem, but you cannot wander out. You have to be scientific. And what that actually means is, for me, what I did is I started tracking all these different variables in my life that I thought might relate, so like, how long did I play today? What time did I start? What time did I stop? Was it morning, afternoon, or evening? What did I eat? How much sleep did I get? And by doing that, I was able, like, that's what did it for me. Noticing that, like, okay, if I play in 5-minute sessions throughout the day, that seems to leave me feeling better the next day than if I play for half an hour straight. And in the people I've talked to who I've kind of, given some advice to, who are dealing with lip injuries, that has been really effective for them as well. You have to be extremely methodical and scientific. And the second thing I would say is that everybody's journey is different. And that's what's so frustrating about these kind of things. If you're starting from scratch and you're a 7th grader and you want to become a good player, we kind of know how to become a good brass player, right? There are established schools of thought, Arnold Jacobs, Gail Williams, that'll take you through to become good, to become a skilled player. But when it comes to recovering from an injury, there's no one way. You have to talk to this person and get some of their ideas, and talk to this person and take an idea from them, and this other person. You talk to 10 or 15 people, you'll probably figure it out, but you can't go it on your own.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for saying that so much. Really great advice. And I think that's amazing because I really agree with you on that wholeheartedly. You know, it really is very individualistic with recovery, and like you said, being scientific about it. I really agree with that because I think a lot of people, you know, when I first started my blog, people would kind of criticize me on the fact that I was being highly aware of what was going on with my embouchure and my body and everything, and they're like,
Right.
why are you focusing on your body? Why aren't you just playing music and not focusing, and just focus on the music or focus on something else? Don't focus on what's going on here. But the thing is, when you get injured, whether it's a muscle tear and you're recovering or focal dystonia, you have to become highly aware of your body, where and relieving these areas of tension and relieving, just being more highly aware of what's going on and what your body's trying to tell you what is right and what is wrong, because it will allow you, it will guide you along the way and say, no, I don't like this. No, don't go, don't do it this way. And so I wasn't approaching it like, you know, not like I'm sitting down doing Koprosh studies or, you know, the Clark studies like up and down or something. So yeah, I totally wholeheartedly agree with you with that. And then the documenting as well. I always tell people all the time, if you think you're getting an injury, or even after you get an injury of some sort, always document what's happening to you as you're rehabilitating, so you can look back and observe. Recording videos of yourself playing, especially with dystonia, you can observe yourself better rather than just looking in the mirror the whole time and criticizing yourself, you know, while you're playing. Helps a lot too. So thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah, well, and I'm glad you piggybacked on it, because, you know, I think it's a great point that, you know, the whole kind of Chicago school idea of like, just keep your mind on the aural concept, like just focus on the sound you want to make. That works when everything's healthy. But when something goes wrong, you're going to have to get under the hood. And then once you have gotten under the hood and you've kind of made some changes, and you've, like you said, you've paid attention to releasing tension in parts of your body, and you've kind of tinkered with your embouchure a little bit, then you can go back to focusing on the sound. And that was the key for me. You know, I had to think about how my lips worked for a while. And then once I kind of got them back together, now I do try to think about what I want to sound like. But so I think it's a great point. Now, you have to be willing to think about the physical aspects, even if that's not kind of how you were raised as a brass player.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of think of it kind of like, you know, just like if you got out of any other major surgery and you know, let's say you got, you know, back surgery done, you wouldn't just start doing, you know, sit-ups right away or or something like that, backstrokes, I don't know.
Totally.
And the same with dystonia, I liken it to having a stroke. It's like you in order to learn how to walk again, you can't just start running. You have to just not even crawl. You have to go back to like, how do I even put my foot on the ground, to how do I bend my ankle and bend my knee, and where does the support go? Because your body doesn't give you that feedback. So you have to really try mental effort to try to make it go in the direction you want it to go, and not force it, but kind of be aware of, you know, what you're doing. So yeah.
Well, and the patience that it requires. I mean, I'm sure it's been your experience. It's definitely been my experience that, oh my gosh, you have to be so patient, and that can be a real challenge for some of us.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I can't tell you how many people have, you know, when they get injured or have focal dystonia, especially, they just want to answer right away, a quick fix. They're like, I got to get back to playing. I can't stop playing right now. I can't do it. I just got to plow on through it. And, you know, and for people with focal dystonia, it's not uncommon for them to develop a secondary injury, like whether it's TMJ or a muscle tear or overuse. Which makes it even more complicated to diagnose, because sometimes people, what will happen is they'll have onset dystonia, which is really hard to catch, and then they'll start to try to adjust to fix the lack of feedback, and they'll start to push more and play through things, and then they end up getting swelling or overuse, and then they
have two problems.
Yeah, and someone will be like, oh, you just have overuse injury. And then years down the road, as soon as the swelling resides and things start to get better, they get full-blown dystonia symptoms, and they're like, what the heck just happened? I don't know what just happened. So it's, yeah, it's unfortunate to have any type of setback. So yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Well, I'm just really happy that you've been able to share this experience, and as far as rehabilitation as well too. So quickly to touch upon rehabilitation a little
Mhm.
further, do, was there any type of like, how do I say this? Because whenever people ask me like, is there any type of playing exercises you do? And it's like, I have to really explain to them how basic they are, but also more importantly, like why I do this certain exercise. It's not the same approach as you would if you sit down to practice. It's
Mhm.
like completely different. So was there any particular type of playing that you did that helped guide you along the way?
One idea that was really helpful for me was Lucinda Lewis's idea of blocked buzzing. Is that something you've come across in the past?
Oh yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
that was really helpful for me. So your viewers may be familiar with the idea already, but I don't have my horn with me. Otherwise, I would show you. So it's like mouthpiece buzzing, but you plug the end of the mouthpiece with your other hand, so the air can't go anywhere. And but what that does is that creates back pressure in your intraoral cavity in your mouth, and this whole system here, and it basically recreates your ideal embouchure. So because the muscles are not actually having to support anything because the air is supporting them, supporting things for them, it basically kind of shows you what you should be shooting for. So when I was just recovering from surgery, I did a lot of blocked buzzing. So so I was looking in a mirror, right? So I'm playing, and things look kind of collapsed and not very firm. So then I'd do some blocked buzzing, and I would say, okay, that looks like a really good embouchure. I'm going to try to recreate that as I put the mouthpiece back on the horn and play something. So, Lucinda has a couple of great books, Broken Embouchures and Embouchure Rehabilitation. And, if you are dealing with any kind of an injury, those are two books that need to be on your shelf. So blocked buzzing, a lot of mouthpiece buzzing, and a lot of post-surgery. You touched on the idea of scar tissue. After a surgery like this, at least in my experience, there were two sets of scar tissue. So if you remember what I described, what happened, he makes the incision, pulls the skin back, fixes the actual tear, which was up in here, kind of between the lip and the nose, and then sews
Oh,
that back up, and then puts the skin back, and then sews the main incision back up. So there
oh,
were two things that had to be sewn up there, and so there's scar tissue right where the lip meets the skin, and scar tissue inside.
oh my
Um,
gosh.
and so that was hard as a rock for a while, and it softened up over time. But um, so basically, getting that scar tissue to vibrate took a lot of work, and so I did a lot of mouthpiece buzzing and a lot of lip buzzing during that time.
Wow. Thank you for saying that. Because yeah, I think the scar tissue thing is something that people, of course, not a lot of people who don't get injured, they don't understand it at all. Like,
Right.
how it's so for scar tissue, it's normal to get hard, and then over time it kind of, it can kind of massage it. It gets a little bit more, loose feeling, which is good.
Right. Right.
Allows more flexibility. But yeah, I'm glad you said that. I was gonna say, yeah, Lucinda Lewis. I tried to get her on here for a special talk as well, and she really wanted to do it, but she's so backed up during the quarantine with people who have time to work with her. So
Sure.
she's like, I'm sorry, I'm so backed up. She's like, but I really want to do this at some point. So I'm hoping to get her down the road or something.
It'd be
Um,
great if you could. She's the Arnold Jacobs of injuries. I mean, she's it, man. She was helpful to me. I bet I talked to her on the phone for like 3 hours at different, total. She's just amazing.
Yeah, I love her. I mean, and I thanked her too for being just such a trailblazer in
Yeah.
the field of just opening up conversation about injuries and embouchure issues, ranging from, focal dystonia to just, basic issues, that people have. Because that's the hardest thing for people to understand, and they need to understand is how do you divide up the symptoms between, how do you know the symptoms of each variable of injury
Hmm.
that you can have, and to know exactly what it feels like, because that's the hardest thing, is describing what it feels like, and she did a great job of explaining that in her book. um,
Yeah, she really does. She kind of breaks it down, and it's so subjective, and there's things are so different for each person, But yeah, she really does a good job of kind of putting some big categories in place and helping people kind of understand what they're dealing with.
yeah, and I like the block buzzing as well too. It helped me a lot as well in rehabilitation too. I think one of the
Mm.
biggest things that taught me, especially the focal dystonia, was, again, like you mentioned, the back pressure, like the realization of how back pressure can affect and support your embouchure when you're rehabilitating. So a lot of people who reach out to me that want to do the block buzzing, I think for some of them, I might do it differently than everyone else. But when I do the block buzzing, I cover the end of my mouthpiece. I blow really gentle air into it. A lot of people just try to blow like really tight, sealed, like, you know, like, and I'll blow really gentle air into it because for embouchure dystonia, if we blow too hard into it, sometimes the spasms will happen.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so I had to just really gently blow into it, and then it would set my embouchure like a normal embouchure as well.
Right.
And I started thinking, well, if I release the back pressure just a little bit somehow, maybe because obviously I can set embouchure without spasms when I do the block buzzing. But maybe if I find a way to release a little bit of the back pressure, I can kind of slowly build my way back into a free blowing mouthpiece. So what I did was I started covering the end of my mouthpiece, my pinky on the end, like very, you know, just different types of, you know, like a third covered.
I did the same thing. Covered. Yeah.
Yeah, and it really helped because I realized that this back pressure was like a crutch for me to be able to rehabilitate, because I could not blow into my mouthpiece like completely open without my spasms going crazy. So I would have to like cover it up a certain degree and then blow into it, and then slowly work my way into buzzing without the pinky on the end.
Sure.
And so that's how I did block buzzing. It really helped me a lot in that sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not even sure. I kind of did the same thing, you know, kind of gradually transitioning from blocked buzzing to open buzzing, and trying to get the chops to do the same thing, you know, and not to have issues.
Yeah, I really like that. Thank you for saying that. I'm glad we found that commonality too.
Me too. Yeah.
And it definitely affected the choice of mouthpiece I play on too, because you know, for a really long time before I got embouchure dystonia, I played on really like just, you know, what they call like pea shooter mouthpieces, just really you know, streamline the air, and this really tiny just mouthpiece just cuts through, you know, loud sound, just goes out there. And all of a sudden I had to go back to my Farkas Deep Cup, which is a really, you know, deep, heavy, really resistant mouthpiece. It has beautiful tone, but it's just heavy. Like if I want to go in my high range, it cuts my endurance down, you know.
Sure, totally.
But I was like, I have to do that because I can't play on any other mouthpiece. It has to have a certain resistance on it. So yeah.
Well, and that's a great point too. You know, like a lot of people get injured. You know, you have to rethink your choice of equipment and kind of what associations you have with that. So in my case, I had always played kind of bigger orchestral trumpet playing equipment. So, you know, large bore C trumpet, medium large bore B flat, you know, 1.5 C or bigger mouthpieces. And in trumpet speak, these are all fairly big, you know, equipment. Well, after the injury, I went to a medium bore B flat trumpet, and I went to a 3C mouthpiece, which is pretty middle of the road. And I had to kind of get over, like, I had like associations that like real players play big equipment, and I had to kind of like let go of that, because when I went to that smaller equipment, it made my life so much easier, and it's made playing a lot more fun too.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the biggest things about having an injury is you have to really break down these walls of you've been kind of schooled to think a certain way. Like if my embouchure doesn't look this way, then I'm not doing the right thing. If I don't play this certain equipment, I'm not a good player. And it's just like such a huge breakdown of not only our egos and self-esteem, unfortunately, but also it really humbles us and makes us step back and rethink what we've been taught too. Like, is this really the most efficient equipment for me to play on just because everybody else plays it? Is this really the way I should be? Should I be focused on the way I look versus the way I feel? You know, what's more important here? And I think after going through an injury, you really realize how important it is to listen to your body and follow it, even if it's this off stream, you know, completely unique way of playing. Like, you know, I've seen some trumpet players where they play out the side of their, what's that one trumpet player in Germany plays out the side of his face, like right here. And some horn players play, you know, on the inside of the lip, the low horn players, not very many because they go through embouchure changes, but play on the inside of the lip for a low horn playing.
Sure, I've seen that. Yeah.
I have a couple questions here actually in the live stream for you, so I'm just going to go ahead
Great.
and review them. So I just want to say hello to everybody that's watching. John K. He told me I could pronounce his name that way because I can't say his last name.
Okay.
Hi, John. Thank you for joining. He's a trumpet player. Lucian Tompa, horn player. Hello. Ellen Labar. Thank you for asking all these questions, Ellen. Tyler Richardson, a really good trumpet player friend of mine that I went to see you Boulder with, is watching. Ellen Labar says, "Were you left with scarring?" And then he wrote in parentheses SP question mark. I don't know what that means.
Oh, spelling maybe.
Oh yeah, with scarring from the surgery. Were you left with scarring from the surgery? Yeah.
Yes. So, and let me put my self view on so I can kind of see what I'm showing you. So I do have a little bit of a scar here, and I don't know if you can even really see it. It's right along the perimeter.
Yeah, I can. It looks kind of, does it feel kind of, what is it, like flat, not flat, but different there, like a different type of
Tissue, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. So right after the surgery, well, I mean, right after the surgery, it was, a few months after the surgery, after things had healed up. Yeah, it was very rubbery and hard, like kind of like rubber, actually. After about a year, it softened up quite a bit, and now it feels like regular tissue. I don't notice it at all when I'm playing. If I really, push it, I can feel it's not quite as supple and pliant as muscle or fat, but it's not an issue anymore. It was an issue for a while, but it went away.
That's great. How long would you say it took to get to that kind of feeling? Like, because I know for some people, they say it takes months, and then for some people, like no, it was a couple of years before the scar tissue actually became more flexible or softer. Like, how long would you say it took for it to go from that hard state to more soft and flexible for you?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly. I think it's somewhere in about a year, somewhere in the middle. You said a couple months to a couple of years. I think by a couple of years it was completely back to normal. But it was longer than a few months. And one of the issues with new scar tissue too is that it can be kind of painful as you're learning to play on it after you haven't played for a while. So I had some shooting pains, and in fact, that was one of the biggest challenges with recovery for me. I was so kind of gun shy of any kind of pain or discomfort after my surgery that if I had any kind of pain while I was playing, I'd put the horn down for the day. And I didn't make much progress at first. And I had this lesson with Alan Siebert, who, like I said, has had this injury himself many years ago. And he said, you're never going to make any progress if you let every single small pain scare you off. You got to push through some of those. So for me, after I had been recovering for a while, that turned out to be the key to full recovery. So not only, I guess what I'm saying is, not only do we have to figure out our own solutions, but those solutions need to change over time too. And so it's a real challenge, but it's a huge opportunity for personal growth coming back from an injury.
Oh, that's so great you said that. I did an interview with Warren Deck recently.
I saw that, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm so glad you caught it. He gave some really great advice too, and very similar to what you said. He said, allow your perception to change over time of what works for you and what doesn't work for you, because it will change as you rehabilitate. One thing that works one year might not work the next year. Really be open to being flexible with change to whatever helps your body along the way. And I'm really glad that you talked about the tingling that you had, because Ellen also asked, has the tissue ever been numb in that area?
Before the surgery, I did have quite a bit of numbness and a lot of tingling. That was one of the main symptoms that I had, when I had the stretch, but it wasn't a tear yet. And I had that year of kind of up and down madness. A lot of tingling, a lot of numbness. Since then, not recently. I mean, this was all 10 years ago now for me, the initial injuries. And as I was kind of coming out of those, I did have some tingling and some numbness. Yes.
All right. And they also ask, sorry, that was, I keep checking my comment.
That's great. Yeah.
They also ask, right, there will be pain when muscle building. We have to tear down to build up, right?
Right. Absolutely. And that's, that's true in any kind of physical activity. If you're lifting weights or something, there's going to be, you have to break things down just enough that they rebuild themselves stronger. And of course, the trick is to not break them down so much that you have an injury or lasting challenges.
Yeah, and I think one of those ways to cope with that is to balance it out. And I don't know if this is the same for you, but for me, I really had to learn how to self-care for my body in a way that I never had before. Like no one had ever told me how to properly ice or heat pack before, because I've heard of musicians who've gone to ice pack a swollen face or something, and they've overdone it, or they don't know how to do it properly or how much time to spend doing it. Just general care too, like wearing mouth guard if you have jaw problems or jaw pain. Like you said, doing the stretches like every day, making sure that you're stretching before you're playing, stretching after you're playing, and just really taking care of your body as if you injured your back or injured something else, your leg. You got to really focus on rebuilding things. But like you said, also there's some times where you have to kind of push past that plateau, and it can be uncomfortable and scary, but you kind of have to do it in a way where you push yourself but you not overdo it, and then you just hope to God that, that everything's going to be okay afterwards, and then the best you can do is take some a leave or ibuprofen and take care of yourself and hope that everything's going to be okay.
Exactly. Yeah, you got to kind of find that line, and some days you're going to go too far to one side of it, but I think if you're keeping in mind challenging yourself while listening to your body, you'll find the right path.
Yeah, I agree. I know with vocal dystonia, when I first rejoined an orchestra, when I was able to, because I've been able to rehabilitate to the point that I can play in an amateur level group again. I play in a brass quintet as well, and it was really hard for me to take that first plunge because I just remember, it's different because once you get back into playing, it's like, okay, I just gotta play and gotta go, because you don't have time to really think about your body the whole time. Right. You just kind of have to hope that your brain kicks in, your body's like, okay, I got your back. But sometimes it doesn't, and you just fail. You fall flat on your face. You're like, well, that was not pretty, but I tried and I did it. And the more I did it, the better I got over time. My body started to pick up and adjust, and I was like, oh, thank goodness, because it's just one of those things. It's like learning how to walk again, like a baby. You start walking, you fall flat on your face, and you get up and try again.
Yeah, and you got to be okay with falling flat on your face sometimes. And actually, that reminds me of a point I'll make really quickly. One of the most helpful things I did when I was recovering from these injuries actually was go to some counseling. So that's not directly related to your lips, of course, but this was my career, and it was really kind of traumatic for me. And I know that's true for a lot of people. And I mean, I was early in my career, and I wasn't playing in the New York Phil or anything. I was a freelancer trying to, get to the next level. But man, going to talk to somebody about this kind of stuff really helped me kind of relax, not stress about it so much, and actually helped me make quicker progress because I wasn't putting so much pressure on myself every single day. So I would urge, if you're watching this and you are dealing with an injury of some kind, especially if it's your profession, think about going to talk to somebody. It can be massively helpful.
Oh, I agree. Thank you. Really good advice, Jonathan. Thank you so much for saying that. I agree as well. I have some more people chiming in. Let me see here.
Great.
Yeah, it was so tricky. Musicians are athletes. Yeah, we sure are. And I think if people thought of it that way more often than music is easy, and they thought of themselves as a skilled athlete, it would help too. They said, I have been dealing with shaking for a number of years. I really don't know if it is dystonia or not. Sometimes it seems like I'm getting better, but other times not so much. I know it's very hard to tell when things are going wrong, especially if it's like in one of those gray areas, like, what is this? I don't know what this is. Am I overusing myself or what's going on? or is it age? Like I remember when I first started experiencing my air leak, which was my first symptom, I remember thinking, am I outgrowing my horn? Because I was at my best playing ability I had ever been at. Like I was at the top peak of my performance skills. I had reached this new level where I was like, wow, I'm really excited. I love playing. You know, I always love playing, but I really felt very confident in my abilities. And then all of a sudden this air leak started happening. And I was like, I wonder if I'm outgrowing my horn, or I need like a different equipment or something soon, or, you know, so it's hard to tell sometimes, like if it's age related, if it's something more serious, that kind of thing. So they're saying, thank you for the great advice. And then everybody else, thank you for chiming in and waving too. Thank you so much. People always wave to me and it'll go to my inbox and I'm always waving back to them too.
Oh, that's awesome.
So thank you so much for joining me, and I'm sorry that I'm keeping you extra long, but
oh, that's okay. I'm really enjoying this conversation.
I know, it's so nice to catch up with. This is why I love doing this, because it's so great to talk to other musicians who have been through any type of setback, because it doesn't matter whether it's focal dystonia or muscle tear, they're all equally bad, even if it's just a general little setback or something. It's just horrible to go through.
It is, and finding other people who've gone through it, man, that's one of the best things you can do.
Yeah, I wouldn't wish it on anyone ever. So
yeah, me neither.
Well, Jonathan, I really love, for those that are watching, he writes a great blog called Lip Grip Blues, which is about his experience with his muscle tear and surgery. But he also has a really great website, and I've been reading his website because he does a lot of great information on self-development and personal growth. And I was, as I'm reading all these, Jonathan, I was like, man, you got to become like a life coach or something. Because I mean, and I really love this because this is an area I really am passionate about too, even though I don't talk to anybody about it. But my ex used to make fun of me all the time because whenever we go to the bookstore, I would go straight to the self development book section, because I would always buy books on self development. He'd always be like, why are you always reading those books, and why are you always buying those books? And I was like, because I want to be the best version of myself I can, because
absolutely,
you have to at some point. I don't want to grow old and bitter and resent things and hold things inside, and I really want to be the best version of myself. So I noticed you wrote a lot about really great advice, and I just want to share something that you wrote that was actually, I think, yesterday or the day before, really great advice. And Jonathan, you gave the formula for a good life. You said, take control of your attitude. Focus on what you can contribute, not what you're owed. That's really great especially if you're injured. Take the blame and give away the credit. Remember, success comes from doing the little things right day after day. And your career philosophy is always do more than you get paid for. I totally agree with that too.
Well, and those are all, so I got into personal development as a result of these injuries, and it's one of those examples in life of something bad turning into something good. I was trying to kind of trying to find my feet after this surgery. I got really into, Zig Ziglar and Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, thinkers like that. And a lot of those ideas that I wrote about just the other day that Katie was so nice to mention are kind of cribbed from those guys. But yeah, when the ground kind of shifts under you to the degree that it does when you're a professional musician or a serious musician who's injured, you have to kind of, I don't know, at least for me and maybe for you too, Katie, it kind of forces you to think about these big picture questions that you don't always think about when life is just kind of going forward normally.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. And it's hard, especially if you're someone that's had, just a rough life in general. And I don't know what your whole life story, but I know for me, I've had a very difficult past and upbringing, and just lots of things have happened. And in my early 20s, I really, I was like, I really want to break this karmic cycle of just terrible things happening in my life and in the past. And I want to be able to get over them, because I don't want to hold on to anything, heavy or dark inside, because it really weighs me down. And I'm definitely like a kid at heart. So it's like, I love laughing, and I love talking, I love socializing, I love being outside, I love just enjoying everyday life. So once I realize something that's holding me down and it's tied to the past, it's like, I really want to find a way to let that go. And that is no easy walk in the park.
No, it's not. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and one of the things that can really help is just learning some cognitive psychology,
Hmm.
as far as like working on self-esteem, working on like the way our brain kind of works as far as tricking us into thinking or going to our ego and thinking about just thoughts that we shouldn't be thinking. And a lot
Right.
of us go about our day, we're so busy, we don't have time to work on ourselves. A lot of people work on themselves physically and go and work out and get in shape, but I feel like for me, mentally is really important, you know, because I'm such a sensitive individual. So I have to really
Hmm.
work on being strong from the inside out. Um, and I'm really glad that you wrote all these posts on how to improve your life. And you also do also mention a lot of things about human behavior, and
Sure.
also doing pep talks as well, which I really love because when I was recovering my very first attempt at rehabilitation, I did a lot of what I call mantras. Like I talk to myself in the
Hmm.
mirror and I'd be like, I can do this. I can recover. I
I
got to
did that
do
too.
it.
I did the exact same thing,
Yeah,
and
and I
it
would even, and
works.
I tell people, I said, I know you think I'm crazy, but I even talk to my horn. Like I'd be like,
Hmm.
yeah, I know, like I know right now we're not getting along, but I really love you, and I know you love me, so let's do this.
That's awesome. Well, and that gets at that idea we were talking about earlier. And with rehabilitation, you've got to figure out what works for you, and you need to be willing to try anything. And if it works, keep doing it. And if not, it doesn't matter who said it's the thing to do. If it doesn't work for you, discard it and find something else.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. What would be your best advice for, like, let's say, and I'm sure this happens quite a bit, but let's say somebody comes to you and has had a muscle tear injury or
Mhm.
embouchure issue or something, and they've already there, you know what it is. What would kind of be your general advice for how they can kind of start their journey of recovery?
Sure. I'd say three things, and two of them we've said already, so I'll recap them real quick. The first one is that you need to be scientific about your recovery. You've got to document everything and figure out what set of kind of variables work for you. You know, short playing sessions versus long. You know, this equipment versus that equipment. So you've got to be really scientific. The second thing I would say is that you need to be willing to accept that it might take a while to get through things, and you need to be willing to talk to a lot of different people. Talk to as many people as you can. So that would be kind of my advice. And oh, sorry, I'm gonna add one thing onto that. Recovering is basically about perseverance. You know, I've talked to a lot of people who have stuck it out, and sometimes it's taken them years to get things back together. But getting your playing back is usually a function of being willing to stick with it. And it may be the case where you're like, you know what, I don't want to stick with it. I'm going to focus my attention somewhere else, and that's totally okay. But if you're worried, like, man, I'm not sure that I'll ever get my playing back, you almost certainly will if you're willing to stick with it long enough and be scientific and try different things and be patient.
Really great advice, Jonathan. I love that. And I really love that you were saying, I was going to backtrack what you said. Oh yeah, talking to as many people as you can. I really think that's very important to also be objective and take what works and what doesn't work from each person you talk to, because there'll be some, sometimes you'll come across people that are kind of like, no, it's this way.
Hmm.
Try to, even though they're giving you advice, try to just take what works for you, and don't, if it doesn't work, then don't use it. You know your body better than anyone else. Like, you know
Yep.
what's going on here better than anyone else can ever tell you. So, just remain objective, be open-minded, that kind of thing. Because I feel like I've come across so many players that will talk to me and they're like, I worked with this one practitioner for like, 5 years, and then it didn't work for me, and because
Hmm.
that wasn't working, they just cut me off, and they're like, drop me like a dead potato or something.
Yeah, you talk about
um,
ego, right? That's their
yeah,
ego getting in the way.
yeah, and it's really
Yeah.
sad. So it's like,
Yeah.
I just it's like I always tell them, like, I wish you would just go and speak to as many people as you can, read as much as you can, even though I know there's not much out there. Read as much as you can, talk to the people who are talking about it, to learn about it. And also, I think some general advice for people who are reaching out for advice from people who are talking out about it. I know for me especially, like sometimes people will write to me and they'll be like, I'm having embouchure issues, help. But it's like, it's a little tricky because it's like, trying to describe your embouchure issues to someone, and it needs to be really in detail. I can't just like, I'm having a hard time with my high register speaking. It literally is one of those things where it's like, okay, I have to know your playing history. I have to know like how long you've been playing. I need.
Are you in high school or do you play in the Boston Symphony? Like what level are we at here?
Like what happened? Was there anything that happened? Like, was it a one-time event and then you couldn't play anymore? Was there any of these symptoms? Did you have any surgery? It's just like there's so many variables involved, and it's like you can't help someone unless you know their whole story, their whole story. So I tell people you have to be really open to show me your playing. You can't just say, hey, can you give me some exercises to help? It's like, I can't, I don't know what's going on with you, and I don't want to, and I'm not a doctor and I'm not a professional. I can't I can only give you advice for what has helped me if you have the same thing as what I've gone through, but that kind of thing. So it's very hard because it's like, you try to do your best to help others, but it's also, you kind of have to have, I think if we can educate others and they can realize how important it is to keep track of your playing history and what's happened to you over time, how important that is, it really helps.
Yeah, it becomes a gold mine, if you're dealing with something and you have a detailed history of what you've tried and when and how it went, that is massively helpful to future you, your future self. So keep track of that stuff.
Thank you, Jonathan, so much. Oh my gosh. Well, this has been such a fun chat, and you're so easy to talk to, and I just really enjoyed it a lot.
Oh, what a pleasure this has been for me, Katie. This movement needs people to lead it, and that's what you're doing. I think back to, I still remember the morning after the very first injury I had, I was furiously trying to Google what was going on. And in 2010, there was nothing. There were some posts on Trumpet Herald, which is an online trumpet forum, but there was very little out there. And now there are great blogs like yours that detail years of what you tried and what happened to you. And it's, for that person who is just starting to experience an injury, unfortunately, having information like your site out there it's a godsend to them. So thanks for what you do.
Oh, thank you, Jonathan, so much for that. Thank you so much. And I remember, I think you wrote to me or something back then, just saying thank you. And I just had because I got my dystonia around the same time you got your injury, because I
was thinking it was about the same time.
Yeah, because I developed it, and it was a full-blown dystonia in late 2009, and then 2010 I was kind of just reaching out to people, finding information. And then 2011, I started my blog and started rehabilitating. I had already started rehabilitation, but I started kind of blogging in the middle of it. And and I think you reached out to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, someone's reading this.
Yeah.
I was just kind of doing it to vent, because I'm a talker, and I'm a Gemini, so
Me
I don't
too.
know your zodiac signs, but I'm definitely a Gemini. So
I'm a Gemini too.
I gotta chit chat, my way through recovery. So I don't care if I'm just talking to dead space. I gotta type it all out. So I would just blog away, and then sometimes people would reach out to me, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, if people are actually reading this, I wonder if and then after the years went on, I was like, wow, I really need to share resources and get resources out there on who they can go to for medical help and research articles and that kind of stuff. And so it became much more knowledge-based over time, but I still kept trying to keep track of my rehabilitation over the years. So yeah, it's been almost 10 years now. Yeah.
It's crazy, isn't it? Time flies.
Yeah. And I'm really happy for your blog as well too, because I know that's been such a great resource for people to go to and read that, and a sense of relief to be like, oh, thank God I found something on muscle tears and someone that I can email or talk to. Is so wonderful. So thank you, Jonathan, for being such an inspiration, being such a game changer for changing lives in this area of our profession that we still have a lot of work to do in.
Well, thanks for having me, Katie. It was such a nice thing to receive your invitation, and to have this kind of platform to talk about the injuries that we've each kind of dealt with and are dealing with. And if that helps other people, that's that's even better.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. I'm just going to check really quick for some last minute questions if we have any.
Sure, great.
Okay, so I just have a bunch of people waiting. And thank you everybody who's been watching. If you guys have any questions afterwards or you come up with any, just post them in the comments. I'll send them to Jonathan to answer,
Awesome.
and we'll get back to you as well. For those who inbox me, I'll get your message as well, because sometimes people are very private about their questions.
Totally.
And then Jonathan, I'll go ahead and upload this to YouTube. I'll send you a link for it so you have access to send it to whoever you want, and it'll be there for you.
Awesome.
And just thank you again for being here and for talking and everything. I mean, I can't tell you what a great thing you're doing. It's so wonderful that you're doing this. So
well, right back at you, Katie. Thanks for the opportunity and for what you do, and best wishes for your continued playing.
Thank you, Jonathan. You as well.
Thanks.
I hope you have a good day and stay safe.
You too, Katie. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.